Guys, Matt O'Connor, Fathers to Justice, back in the office. Just had an email in from a guy, a dad asking, why don't mothers want shared care? Let me tell you why.
Hang on. Hold on right there. Before we even answer the question, can we just appreciate how dangerous the question is? Not the answer, the question. Whoa. Because if I asked you, why are men violent? Most decent people would stop me immediately and say, well, some men aren't violent. Most aren't. If I said, why are women gold diggers? People would rightly tell me to stop stereotyping. But somehow, when it comes to family court, we've decided it's perfectly acceptable to ask, why don't mothers want shared care? Do you see what just happened? Your brain didn't ask whether the question was true. It immediately started searching for evidence to support it. That's what psychologists call confirmation bias. Once somebody gives you a story, your brain starts auditioning evidence. Yeah, my ex did that. Yep. Oh, yeah. My mate's ex did that. Yep. Oh, yeah. I saw somebody on Facebook. And before you know it, you've built an entire worldview out of 3 antidotes and a YouTube video. Now, here's why this terrifies me, because I don't just make YouTube videos. I spend my life helping people prepare for family court. And I can almost predict what's going to happen. Dad watches this, gets angry, stops negotiating, starts assuming every text is a hidden meaning. Every compromise is manipulation. Every disagreement becomes proof that she was only interested in money. He's not reading what's actually written anymore. He's reading what he expects to see. That's not strategy. That's cognitive bias. And cognitive bias is expensive. Not because the judge is going to punish you for having an opinion, but because opinions affect behavior. Evidence affects outcomes. And that's the chain. You don't lose because you believed something. You lose because believing it changed how you behaved. You became defensive. You became suspicious. You stopped listening. You stopped asking questions. You stopped trying to understand what was actually happening because you already decided what was actually happening. That's how self-sabotage works. That's what happens. It doesn't announce itself. It disguises itself as certainty. The most dangerous person in family court isn't the one who's confused. It's the one who's convinced they've already worked everything out, because curious people gather evidence. Certain people stop looking. And once you stop looking, you stop learning. That's when you become predictable. And predictable litigants are easy to beat.
Mothers don't want shared care. Firstly, bad for business. Mothers want to be the parent with care. So that means all the benefits, all the child support goes to them. Remember, child support is all based on the number of nights the child spends with you. So the less you see your child, the more you...
Bad for business. Bad for business. Business. What we're talking about here, Tesco? Like every mum sat there with an accountant. Why then, if little Johnny says he's with Dad every week of the weekend, Sharon, run the numbers, Sharon, run the numbers. Honestly, this is what annoys me about family court influencers. Well, Matt O'Connor, not because they're always wrong. Sometimes they're right. It's because they take one experience and then sell it as the rule. I've dealt with mothers who've done exactly what Matt is talking about. I've also dealt with mothers who've practically begged their fathers to have their kids more. I've dealt with fathers who've walked away. I've dealt with fathers who sleep in their car to just be with near their children. Which one is it exactly? It's people, not men, not women. People. See, this is why I think a lot of blokes lose before they've even got into court. They go into court seeing their ex. They go into court seeing every YouTube video they've ever watched, every Facebook comment, every horror story, every bloke down the pub telling them, she's only after your money, mate, only after your cash. Maybe she is. Maybe she is. Maybe she isn't. You've already decided. You stopped observing. You've started assuming. And assumptions are dangerous because they change your behavior without you even realizing it. You stop listening. You stop negotiating. And you stop asking questions. Every email she sends, see, manipulation. Every disagreement, see, she's proving him right, see. No. She's proving she disagreed with you. That's all. They're not the same thing. I've supported enough people now to know something. People don't usually lose family court because they're stupid. They lose because they've become emotionally attached to a story. And once you become emotionally attached to a story, you stop seeing reality. You start defending your identity. And there's a massive difference.
Hey, secondly, if you're going for a divorce, it's all about cash. Cash is king. Where the child stays, ka-ching, is where the money goes. And again, mother's going to claim 50%, 60%, 70%, 80%, 90% of all assets in a divorce if the child lives with her. She doesn't want shared care. She wants to be the parent with care.
Mothers want to be the parent with care. They want to be the parent with care. Again, listen to that language. Not some mothers, not this mother, mothers. Do you know what that tells me? It tells me that we've stopped talking about evidence and started talking about ideology. And ideology is really seductive because it saves you from having to think. It gives you all the answers before you even ask the questions. Now, don't get me wrong. I've supported fathers where the mother has done everything she possibly can to stop contact. I've seen malicious allegations. I've lived them. I've seen gatekeeping. I've lived it. I've seen children caught in the middle. I've lived it. That happens. But I've also supported mothers who couldn't understand why the father kept cancelling contact. I've had mothers ringing me say, can you have a word with him? Or the children keep asking where dad is. So which story is true? Both? Well, it's got to be. Because life isn't Netflix. There isn't one villain and one hero. They're just people. And people are messy. Here's what worries me. Imagine you're watching this right the night before your first hearing. You're already really anxious. You don't know what the judge is going to ask you. You don't know what CAFCASS is going to say. You don't know how your ex is going to behave. Then somebody tells you, all mothers think like this. All mothers are the same. Well done, you. You've just been handed the script. Now, you stop listening to her. You're listening to the voice in your head. Every email she sends. Yep. Typical. Every request she sends. Everything what he said, she'd do. Every disagreement. I knew it, but I bloody knew it. And you see what's happening. You're no longer dealing with reality. You're dealing with a character you've created in your own mind. And once you start arguing with that character instead of the actual person, you've already made your life 10 times harder. Family court isn't about proving YouTube right. It's about proving your evidence right. Those two are very different things. Very different things.
Remember this. She's not going to be reasonable. And you can only reason with reasonable people.
Remember this, remember this, remember this, remember this. You can only reason with reasonable people. Can I just stop you there, please? Come on, because this is one of those sentences that sounds incredibly clever until you actually think about it, until you really, really think about it. Who decides who's reasonable? You? Her? The judge. The judge. It must be the judge. It must be the judge. Because here's what I've learned over the years. Everyone thinks they're the reasonable one. Everyone thinks they're the reasonable one. I've never had a client walk through the door and say, Jason, the problem is I'm completely unreasonable. It never happens. It just never happens. Everyone believes they're acting rationally. Everyone believes they're justified. Everyone believes they're the victim. Everyone. Now, are some people impossible to negotiate with? Absolutely. Yes, I've met them. You've probably met them. Sometimes mediation fails because one person simply will not engage in good faith. That happens. But here's the danger. If you decide before you've even tried that the other person is unreasonable, you've given yourself permission not to negotiate. You've given yourself permission not to listen. You've given yourself permission not to compromise. And here's the irony. The moment you stop listening because you've labeled the other person unreasonable, what have you just become? Because from their point of view, you're now the unreasonable one. That's why I tell people something completely different. Don't ask yourself, is my ex unreasonable? Ask yourself, am I behaving reasonably? Because that's the only bit you actually control. I can't control whether my ex lies. I can't control whether she turns up. I can't control whether she sends a horrible email. I can control whether I reply with evidence or emotion. I can control whether I keep my child at the center of my case. I can control whether I walk into court looking like the calmest person in the room. That's strategy. That is strategy. Because judges aren't looking for perfection. They're looking for the parent who's most likely to reduce conflict for the child. And if you spend your whole case proving the other parent is unreasonable while becoming increasingly unreasonable yourself, you've completely missed the point. The best litigants I've ever worked with aren't the angriest. They weren't the loudest. They weren't the ones who had the best insults. They were the ones who stayed curious, stayed calm, stayed child-focused, and let the evidence do the heavy lifting. That wins credibility. Not slogans, not generalisations, not YouTube philosophy. Evidence. Appreciate that, Matt, for the lesson. Thanks.